Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited that you've joined us yet again for Home Sweet Homecast. We have an awesome
Yes, we
episode.
are.
Yeah, we have an awesome episode ahead for y'all. We're talking today about we're kind of doing a series, if you will, on sellers and how
Mhm,
to sell your home. And so today we're talking about finishing the process of selling your home, or at least getting some more way into it. So, got a lot of stuff ahead. But, Mom, how's the
mhm,
week been? How's the
mhm.
market? What's happening?
So it has been definitely a market heat up week for us.
For real.
Lots and lots of buyers kind of coming out of the woodwork
Yeah,
with
big time.
inventory staying low.
Yeah,
We're starting to see a few multiple offers.
yeah. And it is so bizarre because, like,
Hmm.
it's it's so hard to tell which properties are going to be multiple offers and which aren't.
Yeah.
I mean, like, they're so, like, they're just minute things that shift it, and throw it in the
Hmm.
favor of multiple offers versus not. And it's so weird because, like, one will be like tons of multiple offers, and one just like it but slightly off will be, like, on the market for the average amount of time, right? Which I think we're at 35
Hmm.
days. Is that right still? Yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
Yep.
that it
Depending on the neighborhood, of course, but
of
yeah.
course, yeah. Hyper local stuff for sure, but
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
really interesting how different, like, this market really is hit or miss right now. Like,
Yeah.
there are pockets of the old way of things, and there are pockets of kind of this new emerging market. So it's really
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, and we're actually seeing, also that, like, we'll have a property go live, and it gets a ton of showings,
Yeah,
lots of activity, and you would think that offers would come in over the weekend like they did, last year and the year before,
yeah,
but they don't. So it just takes the buyers, it just take them a little bit longer to get rolling sometimes, and then we might go into a multiple offer situation, like, later in the week, like 8 days later. So,
yeah.
yeah, it's really interesting. Very odd.
Crazy, crazy time, y'all, but it's fun.
Yes,
It
it
it is,
is.
it is very different everywhere you go.
Yeah, it really is. It
Yeah,
really takes a lot of analysis, and wouldn't you say a lot of, like, communication, like communicating with the agent who's got it listed and
yeah.
communicating with your clients, just a lot of
Yeah,
communication right now.
just keeping everybody aware of what's going on. I mean,
Mhm,
I feel like that's always been the game, right? It's always about managing expectations and making sure people understand what, is realistic in this market. And so, yeah, I think that's, I mean, totally communication for me. Especially in regards to multiple offers or not. Um, there's a lot of strategy and there's a lot of interesting
mhm,
approaches that I know that we on our team at least are playing with to try and figure out how we can be competitive in those multiple offer situations. Which obviously we had plenty of experience of that in 2019 through, well, I guess 2020 technically through 2022, but in those crazy kind of markets. But yeah, it is really, it keeps you on your toes, and it really is interesting.
yes,
Every single home that you see, every single home you put an offer on is going to be a different experience, like every single time. So you're just really, like, feels like living on a prayer kind of thing. You're just kind of like seeing it through. Okay, what's going to happen this time? Okay, that happened. Cool. Like, let's adjust.
mm,
And it's just really interesting.
yes, yep, it absolutely is. So, we are learning as we go and,
That's
on a
right.
few situations, and, bringing a bunch of the, old school expertise from all the different markets we've been in before. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. All the markets you've been in because you're killing it. Like,
Yes, all the
it's
markets we've been in.
my favorite line. You have many of my favorite lines, but the part about, like, what do you say? You say I sold when it crashed in 2008, 2009. Or you say something like that. Like,
Uh-huh.
you can sell in any market kind of thing, and you can buy in any market. Just
Yeah.
depends on
Yeah,
what that
there's
looks like.
always people always have to move, people always
Yeah,
have to sell and buy. Yeah.
yeah.
Yep, there's always a need.
Always something going on. All right, cool.
That's
Well, let's
right.
jump into our seller week two,
Okay.
part two, rather. We've got a lot of really great stuff. Do you want to jump in? We figured we'd start
Mhm.
off just catching back where we were the last episode, talking about showings, and then jumping into some open house stuff today, which I'm excited about.
Yep, so we're gonna start off with, just talking a little bit more about open houses. We mentioned open houses
Yep.
and we mentioned talking about showings, last week. But I also wanted to just spend just a little bit more time on open houses with the market starting to kind of heat up like it is right now.
Yeah.
Um, when you have an open house, and afterwards when it's all over with, of course the seller really wants a lot of feedback, right? I mean,
Sure.
you want to know how many people were there, what they
Yeah.
say, did they like it, not like it. So there's a lot of seller angst or anxiety
Mhm.
about the open house, and they're worried that if it's not going to be accepted well or nobody's going to like it.
Yeah.
So right after an open house, one of the things to kind of think about as a seller is that you're going to get one of two. There's two types of people that are going to come through an open house. It's one that is really right now in the market,
Yeah.
and they really are, pre-qualified. They're ready to
Yeah,
go.
ready
They're
to go.
looking at houses very much like yours.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of one way of doing it. And then you also have people coming through that are just kind of like looky-loos. Maybe
Sure.
they are
Nosy neighbors.
neighbors.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Could be neighbors. Could be maybe they're people that have just started their search. They've
Mhm.
just begun. They may not even know yet what their monthly payment would be on a house of
Sure.
that price. So they're a lot less warm and ready to go.
Yeah.
So you're going to get one of those two kinds of people in the market. And, that's going to depend on what kind of feedback you get too. So you'll
Yep.
see a variety of feedback at open houses, right? I mean, you had a pretty good one this past weekend. Didn't you hear a lot of different things?
It's crazy. I mean, every single open house is so different, and again, this adds to that point we were mentioning, like, every single thing is different, and so we had lots of people come through, and yet you're exactly right, we had the nosy neighbors. In this particular situation, there was a local investor who owned a lot of properties in the area,
Mm,
so he
yeah.
came through, and so I got to meet him and talk to him about kinda how he liked the area and what that was like, which was good. And so he was interested, but he was also still kind of an investor. Investors are always very numbers oriented, which makes a lot of sense.
Mm,
And so talking with him was different than talking to a group of first time home buyers who came through, and they were excited. They were giddy even about their
yeah.
home, right? And so
Mhm. Sure.
they were. My favorite thing with first time home buyers is they always walk in and they just start dreaming. Like, I feel like the people who have lived in one or two houses, they walk in and it's not initial dreaming until they really love the house. But first time home buyers, it's like every single house they're dreaming in. And
Yeah.
every single house they're like, look, my couch could go there. I could do
That's
this
right. They
here.
start decorating, right? They start
Exactly.
decorating it.
And
Yeah.
it's super fun to be kind of in that moment with
Mhm.
them. But so that experience was wildly different. I'm trying to think of what else we did, or had rather. We had some people who came from out of town, some California people moving to Texas. So very, very different there. So all these different types of people this is one of the reasons you want feedback, because all of these
Mhm.
people are saying different things about the property. They're talking about different things they care about. Sometimes we've been in open houses before where a big part of the feedback is maybe a smell that's happening. I've been to an open house before, not one that I was doing, where there was just actually a wasp nest, like just a big one on the
Mm,
patio, and it was like we didn't want the kids that I was with, the family I was showing, to go out to that backyard just because there was a big wasp nest and you could tell they were kind of
mhm.
flying around, right? So it can be the most random stuff, and it can be helpful. And you also have the other side of the thing, which is agents who are a little more callous and a little more just sending it in, and sellers can be a little
Mhm.
hurt by that sometimes.
Right, right.
Just 'cause,
Well, and depending on the situation that they're coming from, whether they're warmed up and ready to go and they're looking for
yeah,
houses and they're realistic, or whether they're people that are just started and they're picking everything
yep,
apart, or
exactly.
whether it's an investor, who's coming through and trying to get the lowest price possible,
Yep,
then that's gonna influence the kind of feedback that you get for your property. And so
totally.
we really, we look for right? We look for themes,
Yeah.
themes in that feedback. That's what we're looking
Yes.
for.
Yeah, always do. Yeah, and that's because then you know that this isn't a one-off. This isn't somebody who's just came in, who was having a bad day, who just wanted to complain about everything. Like, this is how you know, okay, this is something going on. And I love the way you talk about this with sellers. But you talk about, okay, these are our opportunities, and so some things you have control of,
Mhm,
some things you have the ability to shift and change, and some things you have the ability to adjust and make your house more appealing to buyers, but sometimes you don't. Sometimes it's just
mhm,
something that's about your house. And that can be just more time on the market. That can be a price change too, just depending on
Yeah.
what needs to happen for you based on your timeline. So,
Mhm. Yeah, if the feedback is, we don't like the floor plan or we don't like
it's
that
like,
the
what are
bedroom's
you gonna do?
upstairs, you can't change that, right?
Yeah.
But if
Property
if the
Brothers in
feed
Nashville, like, you're not bringing them
right?
here, like
And we'll rip it out, do something
yeah,
else. But if it's, if it's something more like, the color of the wall, there's a bright blue wall
yeah,
and that keeps coming up and it puts people off, well, you can do
yeah,
something about that.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so
Yep.
so we look at feedback real carefully and really try to talk ahead of time with our sellers about that so they've got those appropriate expectations for what might come through because we don't want our sellers to, get their feelings hurt or
Mhm.
have feel
Right,
attacked about
right,
their home
right.
from the feedback because that's not the intent of it. The intent solely of the feedback is to make sure that we are being competitive in the
Yeah,
market and we're
yeah,
competing with the
uh-huh,
other houses those buyers are seeing, right?
yeah.
So that's the goal.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah.
Alright, so what else about open houses? Do you have anything else before we jump on to showings?
Let's see. Probably just I want to just make sure that I'm real clear because there's a lot of variation about you'll hear agents saying, "Oh, open houses don't do anything," or you'll
Oh,
hear them say, "There's no need to do an open house,"
right.
or some people say, "Oh, you got to do an open house." So an open house is only good for what the agent does with the open house.
Yes.
Okay.
Preach it.
So just because you have an open house, that doesn't magically make it a wonderful kind of
Yes.
situation for the listing, right? So if you have an agent that all they do is they put a couple of signs out and they sit and they don't really work the open house, you're not going to get a lot of bang for that time. You're not going to get a
Never,
lot of
never.
interest. But if you have an agent that, goes around and knocks on some doors, delivers some flyers, that they're doing a big social media
Yep,
blast, making
yep, yep,
videos, really working it, talking to
yep,
people, getting their contact information at the door so they can send them more information
yep.
about the house. If you're working it like that, right? That's what makes the difference.
Yeah, I mean, totally. It's significant, y'all. Like, but I mean, you know this. I mean, anybody watching this knows this. Like, if you were hosting a party and
Right.
all you do
Good point.
is you just I mean, order pizza and you sit around and there's no entertainment, and heck, you kind of just whimsically text people, like it's not gonna be a party. It's not gonna be a big show. People aren't gonna find value in enough for them to miss soccer games. Like if we're doing a Saturday open house from like 11 to 2, like
Mhm.
that's kind of prime soccer game. Saturday soccer game, Saturday whatever basketball, I mean anything. Um, game time, and so it's got to be something they find value in enough to pull them out of their routine,
Mhm.
right? And so we do. I mean, yeah, Mom already mentioned it all, but like this is I'm really big about this because like and I hesitate to say this because this is going to throw some shade at some agents out there, but like the reality is like the amount of signs your agents put out to advertise your open house directly affects who's going to show up and how many people are going to come. And like to anybody who says that you don't need to do an open house, like the, you're catching people who would never come into your house because they're usually people who will not work with an agent for a little while. They're people at the
Mhm.
very beginning of the process who may be just looking, but like that was somebody who wasn't going to come see your house. And even if it's not for them, you don't know that they won't just text this and say, y'all need, hey friends, come check this place out. When
Mhm.
we talk to our sellers, we go do basically door to door invites around the area of our open houses, and when we do that, we very clearly just tell them, hey, like, we'd love to see you, of course, to this open house because I mean they're usually fun and they're usually very interesting for neighbors to see improvements that the seller has
Mhm.
done. But if nothing else, hey, just I always say like take a picture of this little flyer I've got here and just send it to somebody you think might want to live next to you. Because the
Yeah.
more eyes we get on your property, the better it's going to be every single
Mhm.
time. And so
Right.
open houses are what you make it to add on to that. But
Mhm.
that's just preach. Like just that's because there are open houses where people just like put 3 signs out and just hope people show up. And it's like, y'all, like, what are you doing? Come on.
Yeah. Well, and they're good for the marketing that comes out of them, right?
Yeah.
That's
They're a
what the
reason
purpose
to talk
is.
to people about
Yeah.
stuff. They're a reason to an excuse to say, hey, this property here, come look, come see,
Mm,
It's huge.
yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know, unless you just have some specific reason related to something personal, I
Yeah.
really don't know why you wouldn't wanna go ahead and let your agent have an open house. So, yeah.
Yeah, and even, like, even security reasons, right? Like, I think that'd be a big
Mhm.
hesitation letting a bunch of
Yeah.
people come through. There are a lot of things we talk with sellers about, like, how to prep, and how to best, if they need to hide things or if they need to,
Mhm.
do that, but also, I mean, the agent should be, at least we are, the agent should be, um, vigilant at these open houses
Mhm.
and aware and not letting somebody not letting somebody stay in the bathroom for extended amounts of time, or not letting somebody, I don't know, gosh, stay in like an office or whatever. I had a friend of mine,
Mhm.
who had some very cool MLB memorabilia, and some very valuable collector's item kind of stuff, right? And I made sure nobody, hung out in that office or the open house. They could walk in, they
Mhm.
could see it, but when they did that, I had my eye on them, and I was just making sure that they weren't just hanging out in there and not opening drawers or stuff like that, because
Mhm.
there's no reason to do that. Um, so, anyways, all that to say, your agent should be keeping track of what's going on in the open house for sure. So,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and prepping for that,
yeah,
and that's part of the reason why we have everybody sign in.
yeah,
We
big time.
really always want to be able to be accountable for people coming through the door.
Yes,
It's not
yep,
a fail safe,
yeah.
but it tends to discourage people who were really there if there was really somebody coming in for not a good purpose. So we
They
always
usually
have
just
our
turn around.
yeah,
They usually just walk out. Like they're like, "Oh, I'm not gonna do that." It's like, okay, cool. Like that's
yeah,
probably for the best.
right, right. So yeah,
Yeah.
so open houses are great. I mean, they do help people have more activity and have a lot
Hmm.
more eyes, like you said, eyes on the property.
Yeah.
So, and then showings, of course, the showings. You want to talk about showings, Jackson? You want to
Yeah.
kind of hit some of
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
points?
So showings. Let me talk about this from the buyer side, and then how about you
Mhm.
translate that from
Okay.
into the listing side? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So from the buyer side, we definitely have two. You have two approaches to it, and you have, and it's based on the client first off. So based on the um, you have when you're doing showings, usually like you have two different types of clients. Usually one maybe just kind of beginning to get into the market, and so as a result, they're not super serious. We don't really let our buyers go see many properties without pre-qualification letters, and that's honestly just so that we can be actual. So when we're not looking at fluff, honestly. So that we're not looking at stuff that they will never, I mean, not never, but at least at this current time in their life, be able to buy. And so pre-qualification letters are a big important part for our buyers,
Mhm.
because it does that. But sometimes a buyer may come through who's not pre-qualified, which can indicate a lack of seriousness. And so in those situations, you've got somebody coming through your home who is looking, who is interested in your home, who thought this home was cute or thought this home matched something that they were looking for, but isn't ready to go yet. And so, feedback from that showing, or even um, maybe an offer coming in from that showing, may take
Mhm.
longer because they need to go get
Mhm.
pre-qualified first before they can really do that. So you have those kinds of people that
Mhm.
you do showings that will come through your home. You also have the flip side. So you also have people who are doing their homework, who are very well versed, who know what they want and when they want it. And so those showings, when they come through, um, you will usually know that. Your agent will usually know that because their agent is probably reaching out to the listing agent a bunch,
Mhm.
and checking in to say, hey, do you have any offers in? Hey, anything we need to know about the property that's specific to it? They're connecting with the other agent, right? Which usually indicates a little bit more interest than just your average, uh, l- uh,
Mhm.
just nosy neighbor or whoever it is, right? So those people are a lot. I mean, and they're a lot more serious, and as a result, they can be a little bit better for you for your timeline if they, bite, and if they decide to put an offer in. And so, we
Mhm.
with our buyers do a lot of different work to help them kind of sift through the initial just looking phase. And so we try really hard to help our buyers. Essentially rate each house they go see, so
Yeah.
that they can pair. And then the really important question is, like, if it's a scale of 1 to 10, I'll ask, and they'll say, let's say it's 6. So the really important question that comes after that is, okay, what gets it to a 10? What's the things that are missing here? And then they can say, oh, it's just, a little bit of paint, a little bit of whatever. And I can say as the agent, okay, well, I mean, um, paint isn't, as far as the upgrades that go to a house, paint isn't the biggest expense, or that can go into a house rather.
Mhm.
And so I can talk to them about that. And so you're going to hope, as from the seller side, that the buyer's agent is doing those things with their client.
Right.
The other thing is that we also get a third type of showing, which, and this is really kind of a more not unique, but this is just, sometimes somebody may call your listing agent directly and try to go see the home with your listing agent. Um, that's obviously, as far as the seller goes, usually that will indicate that person may not be as serious because they don't already have an agent. But you can rest assured that house is getting sold well because that listing agent knows your home because they're selling your home, right? And so there's some beauty when that person is walking through, because when I'm that person walking through the home, I sell that home like no other home, because it's the one that I'm marketing. I'm already talking it up like crazy. I already know all the nooks and crannies that I want to make sure that I really point out, and draw people's attention to because they're cool or they're fun or whatever. So yeah, definitely two different types of
Mhm.
showings. Three, if you kind of count the listing agent actually showing the buyer as well.
Absolutely. Yep. And from the seller perspective, I mean, what we're looking for there is an agent who is serious,
Yeah,
who's not just a door opener, who's not just kind of just taking buyers to see as many houses as they would possibly want to see and never asking them any questions,
sure.
not ever trying to narrow down what they're looking for, and not trying to really sell and match the property
Yeah,
with the things that they want.
yeah.
So, yeah. Yeah. So that's what we're looking for from a listing perspective.
Yep. And then we get showing feedback, which we've already kind of talked about, because this really is a pain point for sellers. Because this is where you start seeing feedback from the market, basically, right? And so this is, sometimes you'll hear things like, "Oh, it's priced too high. Oh, it's priced." You really just hear that one. I mean, there is an option to say
Mhm.
like price too low, but I don't really think people check that often, because they don't want to tell you it's too
Right.
low,
Right.
so they just want to
Yeah,
tell
they
you it's
won't
too
say
high.
that. No. Well, you
Price too
might hear at an
high.
open house you might hear at an open house, you might hear, "I can't believe this house is priced this low." You
Right.
might
Yeah.
hear that occasionally.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Um, Gosh, so price will be a big one you'll start hearing feedback on. Trying to think of what else. I mean, obviously you have improvements, and things like that. So, gosh, I mean, there's so many. That's kind of why it's hard to think of
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
specific ones.
Yeah,
Um,
we'll hear feedback about, the neighborhood,
yes.
if your neighbor's cars are parked on the street and it's crowded, things like that. So, as a seller, if you have a good relationship with your neighbors, it is a great thing to let them know that you'd appreciate it if they do certain things, if certain things need to be done, like, keep the lawn mowed or
Hmm.
not park in front of your house, some of those
Yeah.
kinds of stuff that you could probably talk to a neighbor about
We had a guy
and help.
today. We were doing a showing today, and we had a neighbor come in who lived right next door, and he, uh, like, we walked in the house, and he came and knocked on the door, and I was like, "Okay, here we go, something's happening." And he knocked on the door, and he just walked in. He said, "Hey, I'm the neighbor next door. We're really looking for some good neighbors, and
Mm,
this is what we think about the area, and this is who we are. We have, age blah 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 kids, and I was like, "Oh, shoot, like, this guy's selling this home, like, let's
that's
go."
great.
It
That's
was
great.
it was cool.
Sellers, if you have a neighbor like that, we would wanna know who that is and invite them
Yeah.
to all of the showings because that's great.
Yes, totally, and that's
Yeah.
the house that I just recently sold. Our next door neighbor was, I mean, is still, like, we're very still connected, one of the kindest people that I've ever met in my life, and he, was fun to kinda highlight for people who came through that home, and for open houses or showings, because he was the guy who usually was walking through the neighborhood with a toolbox in hand, right? And so it was fun
Yeah,
to talk, because he was the guy that everybody in the neighborhood called to go fix something for them, and he just did it because he liked the area, he liked people, he's a very kind human being, um, and so
that's
it was
cool.
always fun to highlight him, because it's like, I mean, you're next door to the guy that, like, everybody, like, calls, like, you're both
Yeah.
safe as a result of that, but you're also very well taken care of if you ever need anything, just walk
Yeah.
next door. Um,
Yeah, and that's a selling point,
yeah,
that's like you were talking about, the agent that, lists the property sometimes knows more about the
yeah,
property. So if we want to make sure that if there's a buyer's agent involved, that we're telling the buyer's agent those kinds of things, what you just described, right, Jackson? Because
Yeah.
we want the buyer's agent to pass that information on to their client. And then if we're showing it, we would definitely also pass that on. So yeah, I mean that's all good stuff. If there's a neighbor that babysits, if
Yeah.
there's things that you wouldn't normally know or see about the property. Yep,
Yeah. Yeah,
for
Facebook
sure.
groups I think could be lumped into that too. Like if
Oh
you have a
yeah.
very active Facebook group for your neighborhood or things like that, I think those are fun things to bring up if you have the opportunity to. Just because it's culture, right? Those are the things that I think first time home buyers usually don't care about that kind of stuff, but more seasoned people who have lived in homes
Yeah.
to me seem to care more about what's the area like, what's the neighborhood like. So any insights you can give into that that are appropriate, it's just helpful. So
Yep.
um,
Yep.
you've got some good stories for us today.
So yeah, I wanted to just kind of go through after showings and open houses. So and getting feedback and talking to agents and all those things. Next comes the offers. So at that point, we are expecting an offer to come in. Of course, if there's not an offer that's coming in after a certain period of time, depending on the neighborhood and what's going on, of course, you're going to want to talk about some price changes, and
Sure.
we'll delve more into that in the last episode that we
W-
do with
We'll do,
this.
yeah, because that's
Mhm.
a whole thing, y'all. Like price
Yeah,
changes,
yeah.
because it can feel so weird, and it can
Mhm.
feel it's just, anyways, we'll talk a lot about that. There's a lot of really great hacks to price changes, and we'll explain more about that, which I'm excited about because
Absolutely.
that is such a big deal, like for people, and
Mhm.
it's a conversation that's kind of hard to have with people, even though you just have their best interest completely in mind.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and there are some techniques for that
yeah,
as far as deciding how much to change your price. So
yeah,
we'll talk about that in the next episode. So that's your little teaser, right? That's your teaser. So we're going to talk about negotiation. So offers and negotiation. So when an offer comes in, it's coming in from an agent, and there's a pre-qualification letter attached. So we always call the lender. That's pre-authorized the client, and we just follow up. And then we have a set standard of questions that we ask to make sure that the lender really did their due diligence. A lot of these online lenders, a lot of times they are not digging as deep as they need to ask all the questions that they always that are kind of the exception questions. They don't always ask all that, or sometimes they don't even look at people's tax statements, their tax returns. And
wow,
if you're self-employed, you might write off a whole lot of expenses that could affect what you could qualify for. So we like to work with lenders who actually go through the process, and they ask a lot of the questions just to tease out if there's any kind of unusual circumstances with the buyer. So
mm,
that's something we're going to check on for our sellers, is make sure that they've asked, that we know the answers to the questions and that they're well qualified, because we don't want our seller getting under contract and taking
yeah,
the property off the market to find out in 3 weeks that the buyer can't qualify for the loan. So that is a nightmare.
yeah,
So, you can imagine everybody's already moving and everything's been turned off and all the things. So I have to rearrange everything. It's really rough on a seller.
yeah,
So we really work to not do that. So that's the first thing. And then what you want to look at as a seller with the offer is keep in mind the net profit. That's the number you really want to think about. So your net proceeds, that's after any kind of real estate fees, title fees, after any closing costs, taxes being prorated, all of the things. So that's the number you're really looking at. What are you going to walk away from cash wise at that closing? So that's the number to kind of keep in mind, because what happens a lot is that, sellers just get bogged down in the weeds and the details of the offer terms. And it becomes almost what would you call that? Kind of like a battle, becomes a bit
yeah,
of a war,
yeah, totally,
taking territory.
yep,
It's almost like a territorial kind of a
yep,
thing. And when it gets adversarial like that between a seller and a buyer, then both parties tend to lose.
yeah,
And
totally,
they may not lose the whole deal, but they do tend to lose things in that
yeah,
process. So we really try to work on keeping your eye on the big picture with the big number, and using us as real estate agents. Hopefully you're going to use your agent as somebody that helps you have some objectivity helps you be a little bit more objective with what's going on and think of it a little bit more in a business kind of a way, and not take the offer and the negotiation so personally.
Yeah. You don't want somebody riling you up. I mean, that's not what that
Yeah,
yeah, you don't
yeah.
want the person that's, like, hyping you up saying, "Hey, like, go get that guy," or, "Yeah, we're gonna show
Mhm,
them." You want the level-headed, "Let's process through this. Let's figure out what's the best way to play this. Is this as important as we think as we're feeling like it is right now?"
mhm.
'Cause it doesn't feel good, It didn't feel good,
Right.
as
Yeah,
as
it
far as
can
far as
yeah.
especially for
Yeah,
the seller, I
negotiations
feel like.
yeah. Yeah, the negotiations can get, they can get a little hairy, and people come at negotiations with different agendas
Mhm.
and with different experiences. Some people
Mhm.
have really been hammered in the past with a negotiation on a real estate deal. Other people are, in a place where they don't care. So,
Yeah.
there's all kinds of different ways to come at that. So, we usually like to really, really process with our clients the negotiation and give lots of options. So we like to kind of narrow it down to what are the main things that are important to you. Is it highest price, quickest closing, not having to do repairs, being able to stay in the home maybe after it closes? What
Sure.
what are your main goals as the seller?
Right. Yeah, makes sense.
So yeah, those are the things we're trying to do. We had a client that the way that he liked to shop, he liked to get four or five different properties under contract at the same time, and then kind of juggle around and do a lot of tough negotiating and see who would give him the best deal based on those four or five different properties. And so you can just imagine out of that there were four sellers that were losing in that situation with that kind of a arrangement.
Mhm.
And, he would go for the juggler with the first negotiation, just go really, really hard. And what happens if you do that is that there's usually some other negotiation points in the whole process, whether it's over an inspection,
Right.
appraisal,
Yeah.
or whether it's over just the move out process or some kind of piece of, like appliances or something in the house.
Right, anything. Yep.
Anything. Yeah, anything can come up. And if you go really, really for the juggler, then should you happen to do any of those other negotiations, you can bet the buyer is going to want some revenge.
Yeah.
So, keeping that in mind as well. You want to be fair, but at the same time, you want to get the highest price possible.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's all, yeah, it's good faith is one of the best ways to negotiate if it is possible.
Hmm.
If that is
Yeah.
an option that you have available to you, take that just because it's just gonna come back to you, whether it's
Mhm.
karma or whatever, it's gonna come back to
Right,
you.
right. Well, and you really want an agent who has had enough experience negotiating that they know the things not to do,
Mhm.
and they have a good list of things
Yep,
to do and
yep,
options for you. If they've had some specific negotiation training, there's
yep.
that book. What is the guy's name?
Oh,
Chris,
we always forget his name. He's the FBI or negotiator. We always forget his name.
The hostage negotiator. Yeah,
Yes. Oh my gosh. And we
yeah.
talk about him all the time because he's so, so
So the
good.
book is called um, what is it? Never Split the Difference.
Yes. Yep.
Never
Yep.
Split the Difference, yeah.
Yeah. See if I
So
can
it's
find
a
his name.
great book, and we've all on our team, we've all read that book and gone through that, and we apply a lot of his techniques, as well as some others. But yeah,
Chris
what
Voss.
yeah, Chris Voss, thank
Yeah.
you, Chris
Yeah.
Voss.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep,
Christopher rather, but whatever.
yep. So that's a great book to read if you were thinking about doing some negotiation in the
Yeah.
near future.
Mhm. Yeah. He's
Yeah,
he's
so
he's he's doing a lot of video content too now. He's doing a
oh,
lot of
yeah,
YouTube stuff as well. So I mean, there's
yep,
there's a lot of ways to reach out to him and just
mhm,
connect with him because it's really valuable stuff that you just never think of in social situations unless you do that, like,
yeah,
as your thing. So,
yeah,
um,
yeah,
well, as we close, there's really just one big point that we want to make, because it's a big part of the seller strategy, and that is really just that. In Texas, the seller buyer relationship really favors the buyer, and
mhm,
on the buy side, we talk about that as you have more chances to get out of the deal. There are more opportunities that come up along the way that give you the chance to step out and say, okay, no, this isn't for me. And legally, you're able to leave with, your hiney end still with you,
Mhm.
right? Um,
Right,
and
right.
so without getting, sued and all that kind of stuff. And so there's a lot more of that. And so the seller, I mean, mom, just talk a little bit about what that feels like what you hear
Mhm.
sellers like, because I think I hear a lot of emotions from sellers that talk directly to that. But like, what are some things you've heard in
Yeah.
relation to that?
So, there's 25 plus different points in a real estate contract that can be negotiated.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah,
there's over 25 different areas that can be
yeah.
negotiated. So, that's a lot of, push and pull
Uh huh.
between the seller and the
Uh
buyer.
huh.
So, but the contract in Texas is written so that buyer has a lot of outs. It came out of a buyer beware kind of there was a time in history when buyers were getting taken advantage of
Big
quite a
time.
lot.
We have a whole
So,
contract that we have to have people sign devoted to that exact
yeah.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a big yeah. So they were really getting taken advantage of a lot. And so this is the backlash of that was that the
Yeah.
contract got developed to really protect buyers. And it's hard for sellers because sellers this is they own this piece of property. They own this asset that they're selling. And it just there's only a couple of different ways that a seller can get out of a contract, a real estate contract once they're in it.
Hmm.
That's why it's so important that the agent who's negotiating the contract really knows the contract and can protect the seller and make sure the seller is aware of what they're agreeing to.
Yeah.
And there are some scenarios, um, an agent who hasn't done a lot of transactions and hasn't done a lot of training maybe wouldn't know some of the possibilities that can come out of that contract for those sellers. So the more that your agent can talk with you about that, the better.
Totally. Yeah, it's
hmm
always best. Yep.
So yeah, so another episode we want to also do on sellers. We've got several more things to talk to you about. We're
Yep.
going to talk about pricing, price changes.
Yeah,
So we'll
that'd be
talk
a big
about
one.
some ideas about that.
Mhm.
And then we're also going to talk about a little more about negotiations because you also negotiate inspection and repairs.
Mhm.
And sometimes you negotiate the appraisal.
Mhm.
And sometimes you negotiate also closing dates because sometimes
Yeah.
those get extended. So there's some other negotiations we want to talk about. And then we'll talk about closing.
And then selling your home
And then, yeah, that's right.
and being done with it.
And then that's right. And then
Moving on.
putting the money in the bank and doing what you want to do with it.
Yeah, we're excited. There's a lot of really big need right now for sellers to have resources and training like this. And so we're really excited to kind of share some of the things that we really think are important to sellers because in this market, as the seller side, it's really there are a lot of things that are very very important because what we mentioned, like
Mhm.
some houses go, like hotcakes, they're gone, the next day, and some houses sit. And so you got to know how to play both. You got to know what to do in both situations so that you're ready for it. So
Mhm.
we're excited.
Yes, we are. And this is number 8.
Yeah, it is number 8. Yep. It's good. Be fun to say 52 at the end of this year. I'm excited about it.
I know. I think we need to celebrate when we get to 10.
You want to go to 10? Okay. I feel like 10's a little early to celebrate. Is it not?
Do you? Oh, it feels like a monumental thing.
Okay. So
10.
we're
10
gonna celebrate the little
episodes.
things. I got it. All right.
I think we should.
I'm
10 and
here
then we'll
for
do
it.
25 after that.
Okay. All right. 10, 25. That's fine, me.
Okay.
And then 50.
Sounds
And then 52, just for the fun of it.
good. Just for the fun.
Just 2 celebrations back to back. Awesome. All right,
We'll just
y'all.
celebrate.
Well, hey, thank you again for tuning in to Home Sweet Homecast. As always, we'd love to engage with you in the comments. We'd love to have you
Absolutely.
like, comment, or subscribe to this. And then if you're on YouTube, feel free to hit that notification bell just so you can be notified whenever we release every new episode. We're trying to do it about every Tuesday. I'm sorry, every
Mhm.
Wednesday. It kind of changes on the week, but I think we're trying to solidify either Tuesdays or Thursdays. And so we'll get those out every week to you. And so be notified when they come. And then besides that, y'all,
Mhm.
just know we're always here for you. You have questions.
We are.
This is what we want to do. We want to share information. We want to be helpful. And so feel free at any point to reach out through any of our social medias. Mom and I are very active on social media
Mhm.
or emails, which you can find on our website, kristenberrygroup.com. So CHRIS. I got to do this every time, Mom.
That's right. I love it.
CHRISTENBERROUP.com. That sounded fun. Cool. All right. Well, thank y'all. Appreciate your time this week, and we'll see you again next week on Home Sweet Homecast.
Absolutely. See you soon.